The screen froze mid-scroll, the cursor blinking like it was waiting for permission to exist. No one laughed. No one asked a question. The pause stretched just long enough for everyone to understand this wasn't a technical glitch, it was a decision. Behind me, Omar Blake cleared his throat. "Stop there," he said. Then, quieter, sharper. "This is absolute garbage." I stayed seated. The words landed anyway, heavy and public. He leaned closer to the screen. "You spent 12 months on this," he asked, not waiting for an answer. "Delete it." A click. The main project folder vanished. Gasps stayed internal. Someone shifted in their chair. Omar didn't look at me when he issued the verdict. Start over. No emotion, no creativity. Then he made it official, and effective immediately. "Hannah, your position is terminated. IT will revoke access." Do you know, I just poured another glass of warm water. Because it's quite cold outside, and this story needs to be told a little more slowly. I wonder what the temperature is where you live right now. And if you're still sitting here with me, please tell me your lucky number. Consider it a greeting between us. I was the senior systems strategist, the one hired to build frameworks that didn't make noise when they worked. Omar, our chief operating officer, had a different job. He enforced certainty, process over people, speed over stability. He didn't believe in invisible value, only visible control. After that shock, I didn't argue. Explaining would have sounded defensive, and defensiveness was what he was selling as incompetence. I kept my hands still while my work-quiet systems that held our largest enterprise clients together was reframed as excess. What he erased wasn't a deck or a draft. It was the operating spine of accounts he'd never personally reviewed. The meeting continued without me. Timelines were discussed, action items assigned. My name became a cautionary example, delivered with managerial calm. I stood, placed my badge on the table, and walked out while the room pretended to breathe. As the screen refreshed behind me, a digital clock updated. Before we continue, I want to say a few brief words. The story you are listening to is a work of fiction, inspired by real-life experiences. Some scenes and details have been meticulously crafted with the aid of AI tools to enhance the educational message and emotional depth. I hope this story will touch your heart. But if today isn't the right time, that's okay. Get some good rest and take care of yourself. For 365 days. I worked inside a silence that felt deliberate. Every morning, I refined systems most people never noticed. Because when they worked, nothing broke. I was the architect behind our client operations framework, the one that quietly held a 92% contract renewal rate across enterprise accounts. Each client had a customized logic path, built around how they actually operated, not how slides said they should. Omar Blake never cared about that distinction. He believed in process supremacy. Clients are loyal to the brand, not to people. He said more than once, usually during meetings where my budget was being reduced. He spoke with certainty. The kind executives trust because it sounds clean, what he called efficiency. I recognized as neglect. The cuts came first, my team was trimmed, then my testing resources, then my authority to approve changes. Yet when retention numbers rose, Omar presented them as proof his operational discipline was working. I watched him take credit in board updates while my role was reduced to a line item. When something went wrong, a delayed rollout or a client complaint, the blame traveled downward with remarkable speed. I absorbed it all. I kept adjusting workflows, rerouting dependencies, shielding customers from instability they never knew existed. That was the job. Stability is invisible until it disappears. The longer this continued, the clearer the pattern became. Omar didn't understand the system. He repeated its outcomes without knowing its structure. During one late review, as he dismissed another safeguard as unnecessary, it finally clicked. He had no idea that I still controlled the core logic layer, the decision rules, the escalation paths, the quiet permissions holding everything together. He believed ownership meant visibility. I realized then that I wasn't being sidelined. I was being underestimated. There, The folder disappeared. But the system did not collapse. That difference mattered more than anyone in that room understood. Omar Blake believed deletion equaled control. I knew better. What he erased was surface-level documentation, not the architecture underneath it. I stayed silent as IT was summoned. Omar spoke in clipped commands, ordering them to restore everything immediately, by any means necessary. His confidence was absolute, built on the assumption that systems obey authority the same way people do. I watched calmly, already tracing the chain reaction he had unknowingly triggered. The legal safeguards were still alive. Every enterprise contract contained conditional clauses tied to operational continuity. By deleting the core workflow directory without proper change authorization, Omar had activated a material process disruption event. It was buried deep, written years ago for emergencies, rarely discussed, never tested publicly. But it was there, listening. I said nothing. Silence was not weakness. It was containment. If I explained, he would scramble. If I warned him, he would override something else. Control meant letting the mechanism run exactly as designed. IT worked for hours, rebuilding fragments, restoring backups that looked complete but weren't. Logic dependencies failed quietly. Verification checks stalled. Automated compliance notices queued themselves without urgency. No alarms, no drama, just precision. Omar paced, irritated, demanding progress reports. He still thought this was about files. He still believed recovery meant reversal. I watched him miss the point repeatedly, each command tightening the consequences. The first notification arrived just after midnight. One of our largest enterprise clients had flagged a contractual inconsistency. Their payment system detected an unapproved operational change and automatically paused outgoing funds pending review. Perfectly legal, perfectly routine. Omar stared at the message like it was a typo. He ordered calls, escalations, reassurances. I remained seated, hands folded, heartbeat steady. This was not revenge, it was sequence. By morning, the freeze was official, payment suspended, review initiated. The system was doing exactly what it had been built to do. What had been deleted was not my work. What had been deleted was his illusion of control all along here. I was still sitting in the conference room when my phone vibrated again. It wasn't loud, just insistent, the kind of vibration that feels intentional. Omar Blake was still barking orders at IT, demanding recovery timelines, pretending authority could reverse physics. I stepped into the hallway to take the call, expecting another internal escalation. "Is this Hannah Cole?" a calm voice asked. "Yes. This is Marcus Hale from North Shore Advisory." The name landed cold. They were our closest competitor, the firm Omar dismissed as outdated. "I'll be direct," Marcus said. "Does Omar Blake know who actually holds your client's trust?" The question stopped me. Not because it was rude, but because it was precise. Someone on their side had been watching carefully. Marcus continued, unhurried. "We've tracked your accounts for 2 years. Retention doesn't happen by accident. Relationships don't either." I said nothing. Silence had become a habit. "We heard about tonight," he added. "Systems don't fail like that unless leadership misunderstands them." Then came the offer. Double my current compensation, equity participation, full authority over client strategy, written into the contract, not implied, no committees, no approvals for logic I designed myself. "You wouldn't be required to bring anything proprietary," Marcus said. "Clients make their own decisions. We just believe they prefer consistency. And they already trust you." The hallway felt suddenly narrower. Behind the glass, Omar waved impatiently, signaling me back inside. I looked at my reflection instead. Tired, composed, intact. The offer didn't feel like rescue or escape, but recognition arriving too late to stop what was already moving. Consequences set in motion by a man who believed authority could erase systems, memory, and trust without cost, and never imagined silence could be the dangerous response. "Take your time," Marcus said. "We'll hold the offer. I ended the call and returned to the room. Omar didn't ask who it was. He was too busy reclaiming control he no longer had. I took my seat. Hands steady, pulse even. At 1:05 in the morning, I had leverage. I also had options. I chose neither, not yet. When the emergency meeting invite hit my calendar, I understood Omar Blake had sensed movement. Authority reacts fastest when it feels its grip loosening. The room was smaller this time, windowless, designed for pressure rather than discussion. Omar stood at the head of the table, jaw tight, voice already sharpened. "We have a compliance issue," he began, "and we will resolve it internally." His eyes stayed on me longer than necessary. He talked about loyalty, professionalism, and discipline, words executives use when they mean obedience. Then the threat arrived, dressed as policy. Any further disruption will result in formal disciplinary action. I listened without interruption. Tension thrives on resistance, and I offered none. The next move followed quickly. Omar slid a document across the table. An expanded non-disclosure agreement, thicker than my original contract, filled with language about reputational harm, competitive interference, and indefinite silence. "Sign this today," he said. "This protects the company." It protected him. I read it carefully. Omar mistook my stillness for fear. He reminded me of legal consequences, of future employability, of how quickly narratives can be shaped when leadership controls the story. The room felt compressed, airless, deliberate. I signed. The pen felt heavier than it should have, but my hand didn't shake. Calm unsettles people who rely on intimidation. Omar exhaled, satisfied, as if control had been restored with ink. What he didn't understand was what the document did not say. The NDA restricted disclosure, solicitation, and misuse of proprietary information. It said nothing about choice. It did not prevent clients from noticing instability. It did not forbid them from leaving on their own terms. The meeting ended abruptly. Omar warned everyone to stay focused and discreet. I gathered my papers and walked out without looking back. Pulse steady, mind clear. He believed the threat had worked. I understood the boundary he had just drawn, and I knew exactly how much room still existed on the other side. That knowledge stayed with me, sharp and quiet, as the company tightened around itself, unaware it had already surrendered leverage without realizing it yet. By the end of the week, the silence broke. 3 strategic clients submitted identical requests, each phrased politely, each unmistakable. They wanted to review contractual alignment before releasing further payments. No accusations, no anger, just caution, the kind that scares executives more than outrage. Omar Blake panicked. He didn't call legal or audit first. He called me. "We need a clean transition," he said, lowering his voice. "You built this system. Help us stabilize it." He spoke as if authority could be borrowed, as if trust transferred with titles. I listened. Then I answered the only way the process allowed. "I'm no longer authorized to participate." I said, "Any transition support requires a formal request and board approval." My tone was neutral, accurate, final. He tried again. "Hannah, don't do this." The threat was gone, replaced by urgency. "This is bigger than procedure." I let the silence stretch. Procedure was the only thing holding. The clients moved next. One paused quarterly payment. Another delayed renewal confirmation. The third requested written assurance that operational controls had not been altered without notice. Each action was justified. Each one stacked weight onto the same fault line. Inside the company, pressure cascaded. Omar demanded explanations. Teams scrambled. Emails multiplied. He blamed timing, vendors, market conditions. None of it slowed the sequence already in motion. I watched quietly. This wasn't revenge. It was architecture responding to stress exactly as designed. Systems don't shout. They record. By Friday afternoon, Omar's authority had thinned. He avoided my desk. When he did speak, it was clipped, cautious. Control was no longer assumed. Then the final notice arrived. The board requested an emergency briefing. Immediate clarification required regarding client retention risk. The subject line read, Omar was summoned to explain decisions he had made alone. I closed my laptop and stood. The dominoes had fallen without force. Silence had done the work. Power didn't announce itself with applause. It settled quietly. Undeniable. Leaving him exposed to consequences he could no longer delegate, delay, or erase, while the room learned who actually controlled outcomes when pressure finally arrived without warning. The audit began quietly, the way serious accountability always does. No announcements, no accusations, just an external team requesting access logs, change histories, and contract mappings. I was interviewed last, after Omar Blake had already framed the narrative. She overstepped. He said, loud enough for the room, she built undocumented systems and caused instability. I answered calmly, facts don't rush. The report arrived 48 hours later. It was precise, unemotional, devastating. The auditors concluded that a strategic operational asset had been deleted without authorization, that the deletion violated continuity provisions embedded in multiple enterprise contracts, that the resulting disruption created a potential exposure of $42 million in delayed revenue and penalties. None of it referenced personality or intent, just action and consequence. Omar rejected it immediately. This is being mischaracterized. He snapped during the briefing. Hannah owned that system. She made it opaque. He turned toward me, voice sharp. You never documented it properly. I didn't interrupt. The chair of the audit committee raised a hand. We're not discussing ownership, she said. We're discussing authorization. The room went still as the final appendix appeared on screen. Email logs, timestamps, access credentials, a single directive sent from Omar's account ordering permanent deletion of the core workflow directory. No delegation, no override. His signature, digital and undeniable. Omar stared at the screen. That's not the context, he said. Quieter now? I was enforcing standards. The auditors didn't respond. They didn't need to. For the first time since this began. The blame stopped traveling. It settled where evidence placed it. I felt something shift. Not triumph, but balance. Justice isn't loud. It arrives through documentation, through systems doing exactly what they were built to do, through truth that doesn't argue back when finally allowed to speak. In that moment, the story stopped belonging to opinion, hierarchy, or fear, and became something solid, traceable, and impossible to rewrite later again today. The collapse didn't arrive as a headline. It unfolded through notifications, filings, and calendar cancellations that no press release could soften. Clients exited legally, methodically, citing clauses they were fully entitled to invoke. No accusations, no drama, just choices made in daylight. As the accounts rolled off, the numbers followed. The stock dipped, then slid, then triggered internal alerts that executives pretend not to notice until it's too late. Meetings multiplied, advisors appeared, confidence evaporated. I watched it all from a distance, not intervening, not celebrating, simply observing consequences complete their arc. Omar Blake was suspended on a Monday morning. The announcement was brief, careful, stripped of personality, pending further review. It said, titles disappear faster than authority ever does. By afternoon, his name was already being avoided in emails. That evening, my phone rang. I recognized the number immediately. I let it ring twice before answering. Hannah, Omar said. His voice was smaller, unfamiliar. We need to talk. I didn't respond. I misjudged the situation. He continued. You understand the clients. Help me transition this cleanly. I can fix this if you help. There it was. Not an apology, a request for rescue, for the first time. He needed something he could not command. I'm no longer involved. I said, there's a process. Silence stretched. Then, quietly, please. I ended the call without another word. What Omar didn't know was that the decision had already been made, days earlier. I had signed a new contract, different firm, different structure, full strategic authority, documented and protected. I hadn't announced it. I didn't need to. The collapse continued without me. Control, once lost, does not return on demand. Satisfaction didn't feel loud or reckless. It felt contained, precise, earned. The system was moving forward, and I had already stepped out of its path. Justice arrived without celebration, measured in signatures, exits, and quiet confirmations, reminding me that restraint can be power when outcomes speak louder than anger for everyone involved afterward. The final blow came wrapped in legal language, not emotion. The company announced it as a strategic divestment, a necessary move to preserve shareholder value. What it really was surrender. The core business unit I had built systems around was being sold, quietly, urgently, to the very competitor who had called me at 1:05 in the morning. I watched the announcement circulate internally, stripped of names, stripped of blame. Employees whispered, executives avoided questions. The board framed it as inevitability. Markets reacted immediately. What had once been positioned as untouchable was now labeled expendable. Omar Blake did not survive the transition. His termination followed within hours, delivered without ceremony, no severance package, no advisory role, no graceful exit statement, just removal. Authority evaporates faster than reputation when documentation replaces narrative. The man who erased my work was erased himself. Officially. Permanently. I felt the release then. Not joy, not anger, but a clean break from weight I had carried too long. This wasn't revenge. It was resolution. Systems correcting misuse, structures realigning after stress. The signing took place 3 weeks later in a glass conference room overlooking the city. Lawyers spoke in careful phrases. Numbers were reviewed. Conditions confirmed. I entered last, not as an observer, but as part of the acquiring side. When introductions were made, the room paused. Recognition traveled faster than explanation. Omar wasn't there. His absence was louder than any apology could have been. As documents passed across the table, I signed with steady hands. The same unit once dismissed as unnecessary was now essential enough to purchase. Control had changed hands without conflict, without spectacle, just outcome, when it was over. I stood by the window and watched traffic move below, indifferent and constant. The explosion everyone expects never came. What followed instead was clarity. I had survived the erasure. I had stepped through consequence, and I had arrived exactly where leverage belongs, on the side that understands what power actually is, and when to use it without saying a word. The ending felt earned, final, and unmistakably complete in measurable way. I didn't celebrate when it ended. There was no victory speech, no message sent, no satisfaction taken from watching someone fall. I simply stepped back and let the system finish what it had started. Every outcome followed documented logic. Every consequence traced cleanly to a decision that had already been made. I learned something important in the quiet after. Power doesn't need volume. It doesn't argue. It doesn't explain itself to people who refuse to listen. Real power is structural. It lives in processes, contracts, and memory. It waits. I never mocked Omar Blake. I never needed to. Words would have cheapened what happened. The system spoke more clearly than I ever could. In timelines, filings, and irreversible outcomes. When people ask how it ended, I keep it simple. In business, the most dangerous thing isn't a defiant employee. It's a leader who doesn't understand what they just erased forever. When everything truly came to an end, I wasn't left with anger the way I expected. There was nothing to celebrate, no victory to claim, no need to prove anyone wrong. What I felt instead was a quiet sense of being intact, and that mattered more than any outcome. Some situations are designed to provoke you, to push you into reacting, defending yourself loudly, or striking back just to protect your sense of worth. But I learned that dignity isn't lost when someone disrespects you. It's lost only when you agree to abandon it to escape discomfort. I didn't need to lower anyone else to stand my ground. I only needed to not lower myself. I chose silence not because I was weak, but because I trusted what I had built. Systems, contracts, and processes don't rely on emotion. They don't play favorites. When designed honestly, they carry the truth forward on their own. There's a question I keep coming back to, and I'll leave it with you. If you were in that position, would you react immediately to feel better, or would you hold yourself steady long enough for reality to speak? There's no single right answer, but the choice you make will stay with you long after the moment passes. If this story gave you something to think about, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories like this, consider subscribing to the channel. A like or a share helps these stories reach someone who may need them. Thank you for staying until the end.